Hey, Kelsey, Djenneba, and Diana. How's it going?
Very good.
Great.
I'm so excited to have you guys here today. Finally, the fire signs. It's your time. It's your episode. I don't, it's not that I love making the fire signs wait or anything, but it is really funny how fire signs react online when they have to wait.
We're not exactly the most patient people.
But no, I'm super excited to have the three of you here today. Diana back for the fourth time, maybe third or fourth.
Maybe.
And Kelsey and Djenneba here for the first time. Yeah, let's get into it. Who should we start with? Welcome back, Diana.
Hi.
Do you mind sharing your SMR and maybe your kitty's name for those who are watching?
This is Milo. Milo has a Leo moon. Yeah. But my sun and moon are both in Sagittarius and my rising sign is in Capricorn.
Awesome. And yeah, tell us a little bit about your practice and what you do in this wild field that we all work in.
Well, it changes, like how I define it changes all the time, but I'm really kind of coming to a place where it's like what I'm most concerned with is helping people be human, like actually come into better relationship with human beingness, and along with that come into greater capacity to be in relationship with the world that we occupy, that we walk around in, that we share space with. And astrology at this point is the primary language and tool that I use for that. And my background is pretty solidly Hellenistic traditional, but it's very strongly inflected with like psychological and Jungian. And I also am more than a dabbler when it comes to the magical side of things as well.
And you also are big in tarot as well. You use tarot too.
Yeah, and I do use tarot.
Are launching your own deck.
Yeah, the Rosebud Tarot, which is coming out, like it should be arriving to my collaborators' warehouse in Chicago sometime this month, probably.
Oh, cool.
There's been a lot of delays with production and shipping, but we did go with a stateside printing house to hopefully kind of mitigate some of that. But yeah, so I wrote the guidebook for that, which is exciting. I didn't do the art. I'm not an artist. But
not in the traditional sense, maybe.
No. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome back. And yeah, you were on our Venus episode, one of my faves for sure. You came on to talk about the nodes. Mm-hmm. Was there another one, or was that it?
Angular houses.
Yes, angular houses with Pal, who's also back on this season too. So cool. And yeah, do your offerings are primarily through you write, and then you do consultations mostly for returning clients, right?
Returning clients and people who have opted into supporting my work through my Patreon, because I find it to be, excuse me, Milo. I find it to be the most administratively simple way to navigate like waitlist and stuff like that.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. And then of course you teach too.
Yeah. I love talking.
Shit.
Yeah. So I have a couple of lectures that are already up on my website, and I'll be teaching at NORWAC again this year. So
cool. Yeah. Awesome. Djenneba, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to share your SMR and more about your practice?
Yeah, sure. So I am a Leo sun, Libra moon, allegedly a Scorpio rising, can never be too sure. And I'm a consulting astrologer, practicing astrologer. I would say that my work and practice with astrology is mostly hinged on writing. I use astrology as a means to frame my life, frame and obtain as many contexts as I can. Because I'm constantly trying to understand the way things fit in various containers, just because life is constantly moving in that kind of way. So yeah, I write, I consult. I am leading this project, Mercury's Brood, which is finally coming out this year. It's an astro literary anthology made up of a bunch of various essays and some visual art, not that much. Just approaching astrology from as many viewpoints, learning lineages and traditions as we could find. And yeah, so that's coming. That's what I'm up to.
Yeah, and we will be talking more about that on a later episode, which I'm excited to record.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, you're certainly one of my all-time fave astro writers. You're just a really good writer, and one of my favorite writer signatures is the Mercury Venus conjunction, which you have all exalted and shit.
I do.
It's funny to have like a planet that's when you have a planet that's like one is exalted, one's fallen, and like the way that they work together
or don't
yeah kind of awesome. And of course you wrote some of our compatibility reports for Cusp as well.
Yes.
As well as some sign overviews too. So if you're a water sign or an earth sign, Sun or Venus, Jenneba wrote those overviews on our app.
I sure did.
They're so good.
And I hope you check out Cusp, and I hope you like what you find. It's a really beautiful app that Kirah is co-founder of.
Yeah, actually, I forget what episode number this is. Okay, so a couple episodes ago, we did a whole episode about Cusp and about compatibility, actually. So maybe you have heard that, maybe you haven't, but if you haven't, download Cusp. And yeah, do you do consultations?
Yeah, I finally opened my practice up to the public this year, last month, I think. So
cool.
That's finally a thing.
All right. Check them out. And Kelsey, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Yeah, SMR, what do you do?
I'm all fire, Aries sun and Sagittarius moon and rising. I am also resonate with the very, I think, fiery experience of being in a constant process of transformation, and therefore bio and titles feel impossible. But I had to share my bio yesterday, so I have some new language present in mind. One of the things I've been talking about a lot that I try to put, I'm always trying to find the right words to articulate in my bio that feels like it's kind of at the center of my practice, is helping myself and others to navigate the apparent contradiction that is being alive and having a shared sort of universal experience that is being human, but also a very differentiated, separate one where we each have our own flavors of that universality. And astrology has been one of the main things that I honestly don't even know if I understood this concept of the extent to which there is sameness and difference in each of us until I had studied the zodiac and astrology. And I kind of feel like I have a love affair with the zodiac. Like I've started to realize that as people get really into astrology, they tend to go, oh, wait, like signs aren't that important. It's more the planets. And I get that. And also I just have this like undying love for the zodiac and the patterns within the zodiac. So I kind of look at it as like flavors of consciousness. And I've started to look at my work also as like sacred pattern recognition. Like I'm ruled by Jupiter, right? And Jupiter in Gemini in particular. So I kind of have like squirrel energy looking around all the time going, oh, that's that energy. That's that frequency. That's that planetary dialogue. So astrology is kind of my main language through which someone phrased it to me recently as what you're doing is you're learning the frequencies of consciousness. And they had brought that up because I was talking about how I used to be a music teacher. My past is in music education. So even then it's like the sound frequencies, right? Like learning and teaching music theory and singing. And it feels like that's what I'm doing with astrology as well. And then recently started incorporating human design too, which is another kind of tool for witnessing frequency. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm figuring shit out and then I'm just talking about it as I go. So I do that in the form of writing. I do quite a bit of podcast guesting, and I have my own podcast series that I started this year and I'm almost finished with. And then, yeah, I see clients as well.
And you teach a bunch.
Oh, and I teach a ton, right? Yeah. Teaching is probably the first.
I know, I was waiting for you to say it.
Right? I think my identity as a teacher and the way that I teach is experiencing change right now. So like lots is kind of hanging in the balance. But yeah, I have a degree in education, and I have a disseminating first house Sag moon. So it's like the moment something comes in and resonates and is integrated for me, the natural next step is to share. So I've been very much teaching nearly as long as I've been studying astrology.
Awesome. Yeah. And I mean, I had a human design reading from you, and you came into the 11th house and taught that. And yeah, anyone who joins would be able to watch that replay, because it was so informative, and it's been really helpful framework for me, like learning that. I feel like that's a big part of the node switch for me, at least, into my 3rd and 9th. And I've really appreciated that reading. And yeah, just the fact, I mean, we're fellow detrimental Jupiter chart ruler people, 7th house mercurial Jupiters. And I feel like we've connected a lot on that, over that, especially in terms of teaching and how we teach and teaching fundamentals specifically. So yeah, it's been really cool connecting with you. Since NORWAC, I guess we can talk about how we know each other. We met 3 years ago at NORWAC 2019. I actually met both you and Diana at the exact same moment, which is kind of cool with you both being so saggy. So I remember it was like
the chart for that.
Yeah, because we were talking about like fire, I think. I think we were talking about like Sag placements or something. And of course, I'm Mercury in Sag, Aries moon. I didn't say, yeah, those are my fire placements. Have an Aries moon trine, my Mercury in Sag. And I was just like all about it. Like, yeah, let's, we're these fireballs over here. But yeah, I've been friends with both of you ever since. And you guys know each other from Chicago, right?
Yeah. UAC 2018 is where we really like bonded.
Yeah, but we met, at least for me, we met before I was like a witch,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no,
like,
we met definitely before
this
that.
Is very weird to think about now that you existed in my pre-magic life.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
I think the first time I met you was at my house during an open mic.
Is that true? Yeah, because it was through our mutual friend Aaron, who is not an astrologer.
Right.
Totally different life.
But then you became my first conference friend, because we were both going to UAC, and we did not know nearly as many astrologers as we know now.
Yeah. It was a very overwhelming experience too, because UAC has like 1,400 astrologers.
Wow.
All at once, with like a gajillion different lectures happening. So we ended up being like anchors for each other during that conference.
Awesome. And Djenneba and I, we connected in 2020. I remember summer of 2020 over like Twitter or something.
Yeah,
it must
super
have been
online.
Twitter. Yeah, super online. And then like sure. Clubhouse. Yeah. You were on Clubhouse for a little bit. I remember you would pop in and I would always be really excited, and then you would like quietly dip, and I'd be like,
that sounds like me. Yeah.
Way too cool for us.
No, not even. But yeah, we got drinks down the street from my place when you came to New York.
Yeah, when was that? It was summer, because I remember it was like hot as balls. Yeah, but that was nice.
I was blonde, so it was around my birthday. It was around August.
Yes, you had your mane, your Leo mane.
I did. Yeah,
that was lovely. It was great to see you. And yeah, I'm sure you guys have all connected online
via the Twitter. The great unifier.
The
We're all very
unifier.
online. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's get into it. Fire. So I have been starting off these episodes, kind of explaining why I ordered the episodes in this way. And it's because I'm obsessed with the order of the spheres and the whole that whole sort of, concept of ordering of divinity, which not obsessed with it in the sense that like I think that's true and right, but like I just think it's a really cool it's a really interesting framework. Yeah, it's really compelling. And essentially when we get down to the elemental spheres, those are the four elements, and aka the earthly sphere, also known as the sublunar sphere, whatever floats your boat. We still have an ordering of those elements, and their order based on their density. So earth is at the center, the densest element, and then water, and then air, and then fire. So I wanted to start with earth to give us a nice solid foundation. And it was a great episode. I mean, all of these episodes have been so great, so and so nourishing in different ways. But yeah, we started with earth, and then we went on to water. Then we lifted up a little bit to air, and now we're at our highest heights, so our most excited, our most I don't know, hot. I'm like staring at I'm staring at my candle, like flickering all intensely. And yeah, we're into fire now. So the least dense element, I guess the most difficult to contain, the one that you can't really touch, you can't really put your finger on it. So just to start off, like what comes to mind when you think fire, just like on an elemental level? Does anyone have anything to just like start off with in terms of like fire?
Volatility, and like the intense care required to tend well.
Yeah.
For me, when I was first starting to like really boil everything down to elements, fire was the hardest one for me to kind of like get to the core of, like, what is it though? Like, what is distilled fire? And I'm sure part of that is just because so much of me is fire that it's hard for me to compartmentalize it, like it's just like so much of my nature. But where I've kind of landed is I always use the language of like the self-oriented realm when I'm thinking about fire. And that's not something that I necessarily hear like universally spoken of, but that's how I understand that the element of fire. It's like the self-experiential realm. It's what's happening from the lens of like a separateness.
Interesting.
Yeah. For sure. I was just thinking that, I mean, fire, the sun, when we think of those archetypes, we're thinking about kings, royalty, the sovereign. And earlier today, when I was just like prepping for this recording, I was like, wait, sovereignty, like the ability to govern oneself, and self-create and stand firmly in that process of just like continuous creation of one's own.
It reminds me, like, one of the things that I'll talk about with my fire rising clients is understanding that for fire, one of the most fundamental needs is to have direct experience with aliveness, right? Like really personal, like direct, not filtered or mitigated by someone else. But it's just that direct experience of aliveness.
Yeah, that really hits. Something that I came across, I think, in my early elemental study days, which if anyone's interested in like digging into elements, my number one recommendation, just because this is how I learned, it's not necessarily like the best and holy grail, but Stephen Arroyo's work on the elements is some of my favorite, and it really helped really helped me when I first started. This was before I knew any Hellenistic, and the first astrology book I ever bought was Stephen Arroyo, the first couple, who's more Jungian and archetypal psychological astrologer. But yeah, him talking about, because I agree, Kelsey, it's been that hardest one for me as well. But how fire inspires, and fire is about like the spark of life, and how it's inspirational, and also just like warm, like it's that when things are alive, you're warm, and you're not alive, your skin, you get cold, right? Like your body gets like frozen. And so, which is Saturn, right? But yeah, like just the warmth and the glow, the hope, I guess, even the inspiration that fire inspires. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, and this is actually kind of a departure, but not really. Diana had a post on Uranus that mentioned Prometheus just the other day. And I referred back to Cosmos and Psyche because I know Richard Tarnas talks about the myth of Prometheus and how it more closely resembles the archetypes of Uranus as we know it. And as I was reading through all these significators of just like the overlap between Prometheus and Uranus, I was like, oh, this is just pure fire, like creativity, innovation, autonomy, fire, that spark from which life is able to not just grow, but like find a purpose in, even
propel. It's propulsive fire, like you're making me think about like what's the difference between, say, like Uranian fire versus solar fire. And for some reason, like the thought, like where my brain is going right now is like Uranian fire is like hardcore Aries, and solar fire is just, hardcore Leo. Could be one way to sort of transpose, like without taking too much rulership into consideration, just like steadiness of fire versus momentum, I guess, of fire. Because that's one of the things about fire too, is like like we have tame fire, right? Like we have candles and we have fireplaces and campfires and things like that, but then we also literally have what gets called wildfire. And wildfire can be started by a cigarette butt or a firework or a strike of lightning, but it can just take over really, really quickly. But when it's contained, it's also the most nourishing thing kind of ever. Like humanity isn't humanity without fire.
Kills the bacteria in our food so we can eat it. Like
it
does a lot.
Makes it more digestible, so then we get like these big juicy brains.
I think that's another core component of fire is its transformative potential. And I don't even know if potential is the right word, right? Like fire just is. This is something that's really helped me understand relationally how I am experienced by the other as someone who is so fiery. And I'm in the process now still of like learning to see this dynamic as something that does not require value-based judgments, but just thinking of myself as fire embodied so much. Like I am an energy that transforms things. And when you're in the presence of me, there are things being chemically transformed, right? Like that's what fire does. Even tamed fire is transforming the air that's touching it, right? Like it's chemical process. And that for me does not feel unsettling, because that is what is core to me, is this constant process of being lit, lit AF and transformation. But that's not necessarily an energy that everyone can handle all of the time, right?
It requires a lot of fuel, right? Like the fire on a candle, it's not just the air, it's the wick and the wax that allows that fire to continue, right? Like the fire in the sun is like a combustion of gases, and so I think that's one of the things. It's like fire takes a lot of fuel, which is where we get the tending component. And I think about like the asteroid Vesta, which was like very involved in my solar return chart this year. And my default like keyword for Vesta is devotion, because that's what's required to keep a fire going in a way that is like sustaining and not overtaking, right? If you overfeed a fire, it's going to take over. But if you underfeed a fire, it's going to go out.
This is
Yes.
kind of dark, but I was just thinking that like, as far as the elements go, fire, air, water, earth, I think that fire is the most obvious element that we can use as humans as a weapon, just in terms of like our ability to harness it. I think that the other elements require a lot more capital, a lot more power, a lot more like theoretical manipulation. So like with earth, you can redline people, you can force people out of their homes. You can't necessarily like uproot the earth that they're on. You have to move around the earth to push people out. Like with water, you can privatize water to restrict people's access. You can
poison water.
You can poison water, exactly. With air, like I guess you can go with like cyber attacks, right? Like, and even all these things are still theoretical because you're not actually touching the element necessarily. Like you can, but at the core. But with fire, you don't need capital. You don't you don't need social power to manipulate the actual thing, you know.
Wow.
There's an immediacy to fire.
Yeah, it's loud, it's at the ready, it's consuming.
There was I dated this guy once, and at the time I was a cigarette smoker. And which we can talk about smoking. Well, I'm actually about to talk about smoking, but smoking in general. But yeah, I was a cigarette smoker, and he obviously disapproved. And I remember he told me there was a quote in his favorite book, which he later gifted me and became one of my favorite books ever, Still Life with Woodpecker. And I don't remember the exact quotes, I'm going to butcher it. But essentially it was talking about why humans, the reason that humans smoke and love smoking is because it's like a way of containing fire, right? It's a way of being really close to fire in a way that, you know, other elements we can kind of interact with in a more tactile way, but fire, it's like smoking is kind of like the closest we can get to like really being close to the element. And honestly, the quote just made me appreciate the fact that I'm a smoker a little bit more. I don't smoke cigarettes anymore, but everyone here knows I be smoking that cannabis. But regardless, that's something. And also I feel like, yeah, I'm glad you brought up Vesta, because yeah, she comes up for me a lot too. I consider myself a very Vestal person. I have Vesta and Hestia exactly conjunct my chart ruler. And and yeah, just this the devotional aspect, I think, of Vesta and of the what you need in order to be intimate with fire, I think, you know, especially just as an element, is really spot on. I wanted to bring up a little bit of astrology just in the triplicity rulers of the fire signs. And we have, well, fire as a diurnal element. And therefore, you know, some might, you might say masculine, or the expression of it is masculine, and our diurnal and our solar, you could say even. Yeah, just how we're working with these planets, the sun, Jupiter, Saturn, who are the diurnal, the dissect, but they're farther removed, right? Like these are planets that are not super close to Earth, especially when we're looking at the order of the spheres. And they have so much more to do with our external experience, you could say. Yeah, does anyone have anything to say about just like the diurnal nature of fire signs.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's most fascinating to me about the triplicity rulership of fire is Saturn's role in it all, because Saturn's jacked up in Leo, it's jacked up in Aries, and it's hanging out. It's coasting in Sagittarius, the one sign that you think that it might do the most poorly. And I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot more there that someone else could speak to, but that particular relationship that Saturn has with the fire triplicities always struck me as like, I don't know, sparkly, odd.
Yeah, it really is. Diana, do you have something?
Yeah, I mean, it just automatically makes me think about what makes fire usable from a human perspective, which is containment, right? Like if we think about like our own inner spirits, right? Or our heart fire or whatever. It's like in order to enact things in the physical world, we need a physical vessel to do that. And Saturn, as the container, as a physical vessel, allows that fire to move through space. You know, if we have a hearth, right, or a fireplace, like that's a structure that's made out of Saturnian stuff, usually. In order to allow that fire to be productive rather than destructive. Even thinking about forest fires, wildfires, prairie fires, that kind of thing, it's like they become really great whenever humans are actively participating and allowing those cycles to happen. But they become problems whenever there's a massive amount of suppression, like too much Saturn actually makes a worse fire problem, but the right amount of Saturn makes fire generative rather than destructive. So
love that. Yeah.
I'm thinking about this doesn't necessarily clearly relate to the triplicity rulers, but this is where my brain went hearing y'all's thoughts on it. I'm thinking about how water always follows water. Oops, I said that wrong. Fire always follows water, right? And when I think about that juxtaposition, to me in water, that's the eternal, that's the most connected element. So the part of us that is water, like understands the truth of connection and the truth of eternity and the truth of no separation. But in order for us to have an experience, which my kind of lens on things is that we incarnate so consciousness can have a specific experience. And in order for that to happen, for there to be a separation from the connection, for us to have this individuated experience, we have to come into fire. And my brain was kind of pinging that too, Kirah, when I was hearing you talk about the still life quote. And I was also obsessed with that book at one point. So there's a fun little synchronicity.
Lots of fire in that book.
Yeah. I think like right before I got into astrology, I was obsessed with that book. But was thinking about the danger element of fire, you know, and like there's something about water to fire that feels like that we're like, okay, sure, there's eternity, but let me go have a dangerous experience. Let me go forget about eternity for a moment. And something about what you mentioned with like humans trying to get close to fire, trying to like harness fire, have a relationship to fire made me think of that.
Well, what's interesting. Oh no, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think yeah, that makes super sense. I think there's also an additional dimension to that where, I mean, in a lot of religions, cultures, fire is also considered that sense of ultimate spiritual touch. Like I'm not fully versed in I was talking to my friend Eli who has like really amazing perspectives on evangelical traditions, but we were talking about fire in that particular context, and like to be touched with like the Holy Ghost and to speak in tongues, that is to be touched by the Lord, and the Lord's love is fire, like of fire. So
in inspiration, to be inspired is to be filled with spirit, right? And if we understand on some level that spirit is this propulsive component of lifeness, and fire is propulsive, you know, fire also like like for some reason, Djenneba, while you were talking, I was thinking about Saint Teresa d'Avila, who like I'm not super familiar with her work, but she has these like super ecstatic writings. She was a nun. I'm not going to be able to tell you what century. You can look it up on the internet, but just like these writings of just like literally burning with like the love of God.
Mhm.
This this conversation is reminding me of recently recorded an episode about the decans and just about how the last decan of Pisces and the first decan of Aries are both ruled by Mars, I think in both systems too. And so just if we're looking at, the zodiac wheel is sort of this like continuation of life, death, birth, life, death cycle, with Pisces being the end and Aries being the beginning, and how it's like Mars, fire, fire. That's just kind of what was coming up for me with this conversation around like we come in, we come into life and like, in fire or in pain and childbirth, this like bloody, intense way. And then, we leave by fire a lot of times, especially in traditions where there's fire ceremonies and death as well. Yeah, that's just kind of what came up with me for that. Anything else you want to talk about with the element in and of itself? I think something that I just wanted to go back, I think Kelsey mentioned that just the transformative aspect of fire, and how that's one thing that always stood out to me from like chemistry class or like physics or something. It's just like when you burn something, you're changing the chemical composition of it. Like it's no longer, it can never go back. It can never be the same, and yeah, I think it's definitely like an aspect of fire that I think is worth thinking about, just the pure transformative and therefore potentially destructive or potentially enlightening aspects of it, or potential of fire, and how I don't know, I feel like I'm gonna my brain fog is going to keep me on that thread for too long.
It makes me think about alchemy, right? And like the process of alchemizing, literally, figuratively, poetically, whatever it requires an irreversible dismantling, and fire is the most efficient way to irreversibly dismantle.
Yes. Right. I was looking at some fire and brimstone puritanical type writing earlier, and I came across some language about like when it's all said and done, when it's time for this all to go away, and like God sends the fire, all that is unholy, all that is like not useful, all that is not good will be wiped away, and nothing will be left but like lead and gold and like all that shines and can be purified, that has the ability for the capability for redemption through fire.
Wow. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the fire signs. I've been going cardinal, fixed, mutable. So we will start with our cardinal fire, Aries. And I'm going to let the Aries take this one. What do you think about when you think of Aries? Like, what are the kind of first things that come to mind when you think cardinal fire?
So one of the ways my pattern oriented brain tends to work is to think about, I think all the time about the relationship between the elements and the modes, and how fire is kind of the most cardinal, right, of all the elements. It is that initiatory, transformative, severing energy. So I think of Aries as like the most cardinal sign, is how I tend to think about it. It starts the zodiac. That makes sense, right? I also think a lot about, Aries has this, like, we talk about Aries as the baby, right? Like little wide-eyed, just got here baby. And I am very much that energy. Like I have very much puppy energy, innocent, like I burn people on accident all the time. It doesn't help to have Sag rising in that department. But something I like to think about a lot and that I teach a lot, and probably some of this comes from the natural defensiveness that comes with being Aries incarnate, is yes, baby energy, yes, just got here energy, but the sign that Aries remembers the most is Pisces, right? Like Aries comes from Pisces. So I think of Pisces as like the void, right? Like in the birth death process, the way I've been thinking of it lately is we die in Scorpio, and then that last round through the elements, Sag through Pisces, is kind of like looking at things from outside of it, looking at it from the afterlife, which makes sense when you think about the rulerships, like you were talking about with the diurnal, or the triplicity rulers of fire being the sun and then Saturn, Jupiter. Like Sag through Pisces, we're looking at things from the outer part of the solar system, from the outside in. It's already happened. So then Pisces, we're like in the void is kind of how it feels to me. No time, no space, just consciousness. And then we're like, I want to have an experience though. And so we move into Aries. And so to me, Aries, I pay a lot of attention to. I try to be mindful often of the fact that not everyone has an exalted sun in Aries, right? Which is something that that astrology has taught me that's been very useful. Like there's this access that I have as an Aries sun to focusing first and foremost on the experience that I'm having separately. And that's been a very, very telling thing to know about myself, and then to observe in how that shows up in relationship, and how like the extent to which people are able to access that as a primal, right? Aries is instinctual, primal. Like to me, it feels like having the sun in Aries specifically, it's like no matter how much relational disharmony I experience, like I've got my own versions of trauma response and fawning and people pleasing in my chart for sure. But it's like, no matter how much of that's happening, I'm tethered to this Aries knowing that's like, but I came here to have my experience and I belong here. I deserve to be alive having this experience. Right. So to me, Aries kind of feels like this, just this primal knowing that I'm meant to be here. Like I'm meant to be here having this experience and having it from the vantage point of self. And it carries the truth of connection and the truth of oneness with it. But then it's like, I'm having this very personal, separate, embodied experience of consciousness.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad you brought up like that the sun exalts in Aries, and makes me want to tie in the fact that Mars rules the sign, and how it is very much about this like individuation, like this autonomous like burst of being. Basically it's like you're now separate, you are your own person now. And when I think of Aries, I always think the first thing that always comes to mind is something that Austin Coppock once said about Aries, I think probably in an episode of the astrology podcast, about its animal association, the ram, and how rams, what do they do is they ram themselves, their heads, head first, direct straight into one direction. And then, pardon me, thinking about the first decan of Aries being Mars ruled, and how Austin calls it the axe, and it's this idea of just like blazing your own path, knocking down anything in your way, which also brings up the ram symbolism. And yeah, really, and doesn't have to be that that aggressive or violent necessarily, but it is about like blazing a path forward and overcoming any obstacles in your way.
I have 3 planets, including my sun in first decan Aries. And here's a very short story that will just be like swimming in Aries energy. I started taking Austin's decan class because I'm in a sun year right now. So I was like, ooh, let me like listen to each decan as the sun ingresses. I did the first decan of Aries and then I stopped. And as I was listening to it, he talks about basically what you just said, Kirah, that there's this real intense defensiveness that shows up in that first decan, because it's like, I'm here to blaze my path, and literally anything that is resistant to that is an obstacle, is in the way. So I'm listening to this and I'm like, super defensive. No, I'm not. And then I'm like, oh my God. So that's been a huge part of my like recent processing around it too, is like, yeah, I can intellectualize it and learn and evolve from my starting point, but my like core frequency energy very much is like, oh, literally everything outside of me is an obstacle for me to battle with.
There's like a lust for experience. Right. But again, like the super personal, like I need to do it myself.
Direct experience.
I need to have this experience for myself. You can have opinions about it, but I don't fucking actually care.
Or it doesn't matter.
It's like literally completely irrelevant. Like, I'm glad you had your experience. I'm gonna go have my experience now. Okay, bye.
Like, keep them to yourself, or I can use them to make me stronger, but you probably won't like that experience. Like, you probably don't want to enter battle with me.
Yeah, I mean,
as you not
the one of the images that I'll use for Aries, especially when I'm like trying to talk with somebody about the difference between Aries and Scorpio as the two Mars ruled signs. It's like Aries is the berserker, right? Like Aries has like a sword strapped to their back and like two battle axes and like spikes on their elbows, just like running through life, like cutting through whatever needs to be cut through in order to get to wherever the fuck they're going. And they might not even know where they're going. They're just like, I have to go that way now. And like there's a bloodbath. And like that bloodbath might not actually be like they're destroying everything in their path, right? But like metaphorically speaking, there's this sense of like bathing in the like not water, but in like the fiery hot liquid that is life, right? Like blood is life in the sense of being embodied mammal creatures, right? Like if we don't have our blood, like
know us,
right? And like blood is red because of iron, and iron is this very martial like element, right? It's like it's an element, it's not just a metal, right? Iron is like just this core thing. And so it's like bathing in lifeblood is another way to think about like Aries energy. It's like, how do I bathe in that? Like, I gotta chop off some heads, let's go, motherfuckers.
Hell yeah. I mean, as an Aries moon, I definitely relate to a lot of that, and just this feeling of like, I can't stop. It's, it's just like, this is, I mean, you stop, you burn out. That's a major feature of Aries too, that we can maybe talk about, is burnout. But yeah, it's like, it's just this primal need to like do the thing, to like make a decision, take action, I guess, is like a really good, just do it, right? Just do it. That's a really good Aries phrase. Yeah. And, I think maybe, well, actually, Jenneba, do you have stuff to say about Aries?
I'm not sure I have anything to add other than, I mean, I love Aries. I've always loved Aries. That's why I was so, again, like I said, there's some discrepancy about my rising sign, but yeah, Aries is really cool. They for me personally, I really love how Aries fits into my chart. I love that sense of battle and banter that you get from an Aries in everyday conversation and in everyday life. Like, not every day, like plowing through like hard tasks, like sometimes just like quipping back and forth, fast-paced communication. And I love Aries for that in particular.
Yeah, the like everything's a fight sort of thing, even though it's not necessarily like seen as a fight.
But it's fun. It's fun until
like,
it's not.
But yeah, it's just like this natural need to it's not even a need, it's just like a natural reaction
Information?
to like, yeah, to perceive things as like, even when you know it's not, you know, actually someone like going up against you, but it's like a natural, I think, defensiveness. Yeah, like a warrior is going to have natural defenses, right? And I feel like that comes up a lot with Aries. And for me personally, it has been and always was something that's difficult to grapple with, because I have this Venus in Libra opposite my Aries moon, and I'm like, it took like dating someone who described me as, I was like, oh yeah, like, do you think of me as like Jupiterian or whatever? Because I'm like, you know, ruled by, you know, I'm Jupiter in your chart, you know, your seventh house ruler. He's like, I think you have Martian. I think if he was really Martian. I was like, fuck, he does have Jupiter conjunct Mars. But yeah, it sort of made me realize like, I am very like fiery and Martian, and I do kind of like do that fighting with people without really realizing it. I like to think my, you know, my benefics like take over and make me sweet, but like I definitely am not always sweet. But
do you enjoy sparring?
I do. But not. I think it depends. Like, I definitely enjoy it. I don't like bickering, you know, but I like sparring. I think there's a difference.
Definitely.
Oh, go ahead, Kelsey.
I'm thinking about like, you know, Aries is the spark, something we've already kind of talked about and something that gets said a lot. But if you think about it, I'm just thinking about you all talking about how you experience Aries energy outside of you. And you can see this very plainly in the Aries Libra dynamic of like Libra's trying to harmonize, right? But in order to harmonize, you need something to respond to. You need that. I was thinking about Newton's third law, right? Like, I think that's the one. Every action has its equal and opposite reaction. So Libra energy is like, what's happening and how can I balance the scales a bit? How can I curate the experience? But you need the push in order, you need something to respond to. And while I think that's most obvious in the Aries Libra relationship, I think there's an element to that just zodiacally, right? Like everything in the zodiac is happening in response to the singularity that begins in Aries.
That's really funny. We definitely brought up responsiveness in the air sign episode in regards to Libra, like Libra being really responsive. And so, yeah, it's like, what are they responding to? That spark, that division even caused by Aries. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's making me want to talk about the fact that, yeah, we have the sun that exalts here and Mars that is in domicile here, these very individualized, you could say, planets. And then we have Venus who finds its detriment here, and Saturn who falls here.
A lot
and just
happening.
Thinking, just thinking about like Aries as a place where Venus finds its detriment. Just piggybacking off of what you just said, of like, it's very much about Libra, or Venus, sorry, is very much about finding harmony and sameness, even like, what's the glue, what attracts you to me and vice versa. And in Aries is this environment that makes that really difficult, because it's all about individuating. Does anyone have anything to kind of add about Saturn's fall and Venus's detriment there?
I have Venus in Aries natally. I find that I was just talking about this with a friend today. I've had to grieve a lot of the ways in which I am finally surrendering to the truth that I cannot show up in relationship in certain ways that a lot of people are used to and interested in and able to do themselves. But the way that I can show up is I'm like censoring myself. I'm just going to say it. It might come out. I'm always afraid that everything I'm going to say is going to sound like a super conceited asshole. That's what it's like to move around as fire, super FYI. Fire. Yeah. But I can kind of show up by modeling in my relationships that like there's a level to which I will not bend for the sake of this relationality and the sake of this connection. And I don't expect you to do that either. That's a way that I really think about my Venus in Aries. So I'm actually very close with a handful of Libras who I think we've talked about, we've like really directly named that part of what my relationship has been able to offer them is an example of how separateness can be actually it can lend to security and safety and relationality, like that space and that autonomy and that separateness and those direct boundaries are a necessary part. So that's a way that I think about, Venus in detriment and Aries, sure, but also like we need the glue, but we do need some scissors sometimes too, right? So I can't show up in friendship as consistently or as, energetically softly sometimes as people need, but the people that I'm close to know that there are moments to come to me and there are not moments to come to me, right? So I think, Venus and Aries can teach us like to relate to one another in a way that doesn't require compromising our own autonomy. Saturn, I don't know that I want to lead you in on that one.
Saturn. So I'll whatever. I'm always talking about
and
Saturn.
I'm like, please, Saturn incarnate.
When I think about Saturn and Aries, like I think one of the struggles is like Saturn in and of itself is patience and endurance, and Aries is impatience and sprinting, right? Where Saturn is the like ultra marathoner. Aries is the like Olympic winner of all of the different short races, right? Like multiple gold medals for like, I don't know, 50 meter, 100 meter, 200 meter hurdles, like all of them. And Saturn's like, I can't do any of those. I can't go fast, but I can go slow for a long time. And so I think the speed of Aries is uncomfortable for Saturn. The rapidity, also the centeredness, right? Like I don't, not self-centeredness, even though it is to a degree self-centeredness, but there's like a precision of focus that Aries can have. And Saturn's like, no, we're looking at the structures. And Aries is like, we're not analyzing the track, we're running on the track. So I think that's where some of the struggle comes in. Like some of the Saturn and Aries, like angel babies, I know, like like there's a specific expression of the pain of impatience
exactly.
that I don't see in anyone else except Saturn and Aries babies.
I agree. That's the main signature I come to understand too about Saturn and Aries folks is like, just this pain of impatience. That's a really good way of putting it.
I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think like I'm thinking about the chasm between Saturn's exaltation in Libra versus its fall in Aries, and how Libra and Venus, their inclination is to gather and to consider others and like consider the whole. And I think that's so much of why like Aries can be impatient and why Libra has to know patience, because Libra is so concerned with the other, concerned with community and concerned with other people. There's no way to be both. There's no way to be impatient and also like, I mean, there is, but just
me.
But like, of course there is, but like just getting down to the essentialism of it all. And so I think Saturn, like another reason why Saturn finds its fall in Aries is just because it's not able to prioritize other people in the same way that a sign like Libra can, or like another
I'm thinking about that phrase of youth is wasted on the young. And I feel like that's a very Saturn and Aries experience of being like, cool, I'm finally at the place where I have all the resources and I have the power and I have the access and my knees hurt. Like, fuck this. So
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes to all of that. Yeah. I think of both Saturn and Venus as other oriented in a lot of ways. Saturn really cares about our social structures, our
Mhm.
communities, like the
Saturn's
containers
mean when
that
it doesn't
hold-
care about other people.
Yeah.
When Saturn doesn't prioritize and consider other people, Saturn's really fucking mean.
Yeah.
So,
Saturn is that's
Yeah.
where Saturnian cruelty, I think, comes in.
yeah.
I want to speak to this impatience piece with Aries a bit in a way that doesn't directly, but I think very obviously connects to what we're talking about with Saturn here. I noticed early on in my life, maybe pre-astrology, that people thought I was really brave. And that's something that we associate with Aries, right? Like courage. It's not braveness. It's not courage. It's impatience and a really low tolerance for discomfort.
Yeah.
If I can feel this is not right for me, I do not have the patience to wait for a slow arrival of a trajectory to take instead. It's like, this is changing now. And I think that is often seen as courage. And it is something that in retrospect, I'm grateful for that in myself. And does it sometimes create quite a wake in my path? Yes. You know, and does Saturn squaring my Aries planets natally hurt? Yes. You know, but that to me is like, that's a gift of Aries. That impatience can be a gift. Like the agency, right? I think that's a word we haven't talked about yet that feels very relevant to me. I think of all the cardinal signs as having to do with agency. And Aries is like agency within the fire realm, which to me is the realm of self-preservation. Again, we get like survival here. But yeah, Saturn and Aries, Saturn's, I always think about when I'm thinking about the planets, I like to just like put myself on them and imagine what it looks like from that place in the solar system, right? And Saturn is, again, the edge of our visible solar system. So Saturn's looking at everything zoomed out, the whole picture. Aries is not doing that. Aries is going, what's happening? Diana, you kind of spoke to this, like what's happening right now? How do I feel about it? Would I like it to continue or not?
With
that just made me think about like that like an intensity of self-authenticity is available through, I would say, all of the fire signs, but I think Aries is the most focused on forging it for themselves, right? With that cardinality is like, I am deciding who I am.
I am
that I am simply, you know, and like gathering up as much proof of that as possible over time, right? Where, you know, just like kind of that fighting against the merge, right? We can even think of this like just a perinatally, right? Of just being like, yo, it's been nice hanging out in this womb, but I gotta go. Like now, I'm done.
It's time.
It's time now. Bye. And it's like that, like, thank you for like facilitating my me-ness up to this point, but now I have to do me.
Any last thoughts on Aries? Before we move on to fixed fire, we talked about the beginning, the start, the spark, the lighting of the match, you could say, with Aries. And then we take that match and we put it on some firewood and we make ourselves a little bonfire. Get some fixed fire with Leo. Djenneba, our resident Leo. Thoughts?
I am. I mean, two words that came to mind when I was thinking like, oh, like how do you distill Leo? I was like, oh, immovable genius. Immovable genius. But I mean, like anything else, I can't think about Leo without thinking about it within the context of its ruler, right? The sun. That immovable, big, humongous like ball of fire in the sky that sustains life. You know, what do we need? Water, fire, a little bit of food, and we're good. And so I think that just given what the sun does for us, what the sun does for humanity, nature, like animal kind, there's no way for the the sun to be self-centered, because it gives so much, it does so much for us. We benefit so much from it. And so I kind of relate that back to Leo. Like there's this stereotyping of Leo as like it being all about me, like I'm the center of attention, or like I need to be or else I'll die, or all this stuff. And frankly, I think the way that, well, I'm also kind of like my cohort of Leo suns with Saturn Aquarius are kind of like a special case. We're a little different, but yeah, I mean, I think that most of the Leos I know, the way that we embody the sun is like sharing light, bestowing light. Like what we don't hoard our light to ourselves. You know, people say, who else is going to hype you up like a Leo for a reason? You know, like we're there because we see you, we want to see you, and we want you to feel that glow. And yeah, that's what I got for Leo right now.
You're speaking to one of my favorite Leo concepts, which is generosity. Right? Like Leo is so generous. The sun is so generous. Like my poor son hanging out in the 12th house. I've done so much like labor to get to know her. But generosity is definitely one of the main things. It's like, you know, the sun is like, it's generosity without self-negation. I think is like the, like I say that and I'm just like, I just want that honey in my mouth. You know, it's like, come here. Like there's a, this person, Jamie Lee Finch, posted something recently that was something like, I trust you with you. And like that concept, I think is very Leo. It's like, I trust you with you and I'm going to give you what I can give you so that you can you. And there's this sturdiness and this steadiness and this like, you know, the sun's been burning since before there was life on this planet and will continue burning after like the life on this planet has been torched, because the sun is expanding in its life cycle as a star, you know, but it's not ever giving more than it can give. And it's also not expecting us to give anything in return. Like, what do we like? The idea of shooting something into the sun, like that conceptually is, I'm going to destroy this. I'm just going to shoot it into the sun. Right. But we don't, you know, we don't, I don't know. It's like the most, I don't know. It's like hordes and hordes and hordes of gold where there's so much of it. It's like the image of, oh my God, the like city of gold that the Spaniards were trying to find.
No, I almost said Alcatraz. Oh my God. What is it called?
El Dorado.
El Dorado.
It's like this concept of El Dorado where it's like, there's so much gold that gold is no longer a precious, rare, like thing that people are fighting over. It's just like, oh, you want some? I literally am never going to run out. Please take it.
Yeah. Take it or else. Like, just like enjoy life with me. Please.
Yeah.
Why would you do anything else? I can't compute.
Yeah.
I always think of Leos as just like, sun incarnates, basically. Like the Leos in people's lives are a source of light, of warmth, of inspiration. And I think Leos have this way of being able to cast light on people, share, like it's almost like, you know, if you're the sun, where are you pointing your spotlight? And when you get into the spotlight, the glow of a Leo, oh my God, there's nothing like it. There's literally nothing like a Leo's attention, you know.
It can be fucking terrible as a Saturnian person, I will just say.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I definitely prefer it in private. I'll say that. But yeah, I mean, something that comes to mind when thinking about like the sun's rulership over Leo and what Leo does in terms of casting light, like the sun, yes, is our life source, but also sunlight makes things, like it makes us be able to see color, like it brings color and life to things. And Leo's, Yeah, serotonin,
Vitamin D.
exactly. Vitamin D, chlorophyll, all the things, And so it makes our yeah, it makes everything pretty and colorful. And I think that's also what Leos bring to our lives. Leos and Leo placements is they add vibrancy, they add color, they add pizzazz, and kind of like picking off of what Jenneba kind of started off with around Leos having this reputation of being self-centered or need all the attention. It's like it's more, to me, more about more of the fact that like I have all these gifts. I'm here to bring life to your life. Like, why wouldn't you want to be around me and like see what I have to offer? It's like kind of this inherent, like, you don't have to do much to like, notice when the sun's out. You know what I mean? Like, we know when it's day or night,
Just like open your blinds, man.
Open
Just
your
open your
blinds.
blinds.
Exactly. So that's something I love about Leos is particularly like the warmth, I think, and just the glow that Leos emanate, and how you want to get closer, you want to be around that. And it's like, maybe some insecure people might see that as self-centered, but really it's more of like, no, we just want to be around the Leo. I just want some of that warmth.
I feel like the self-centered image of Leo is a projection, oftentimes a projection from people who don't feel centered in themselves.
Exactly.
And I also will say, like, from personal experience, like, I think Leo moons are the ones who actually need affirmation. Leo suns, especially once they're in that like comfort with their solar expression, they're good. They have access to that infinite golden horde. The Leo moon, it's like the moon is the reflector, not the source of the light. And so it's the Leo moon that, like, if there's a Leo moon in your life, one of the most loving things you can do is figure out what kind of affirmation is most nourishing for them, whether that be verbal affirmation or other forms of affirmation, and like give it to them endlessly.
Yeah.
Like, don't be stingy with that shit.
It's true. It's so true. Leo moons are like your cat, like they're like kitties. Like, you really need to
when they want
behind the ears.
Yeah. And it's like it's like a security thing, but it's like a Leo moon and a Leo sun, like, I feel like in a lot of ways could be just really, really sweet for each other.
Yeah. Kelsey, do you have thoughts to share about Leo?
I do, yeah. I have noticed this, you've all mentioned this to a point already, but as a very fiery person who's not tethered to Leo at all, I've really noticed Leo has this ability to very authentically and genuinely shout people out in a way that when I try to do it, it does not feel as genuine, right? And it's like that spotlight that you all are talking about. I think a word that comes to mind for me a lot for Leo is perception and perspective. And again, it's like, okay, you're sitting on the sun when you're in Leo energy. It's fixed fire. So the fixed signs, I'm always like, you're dwelling in, you're like very firmly planted in this realm. And again, for me, this is the realm of the self experience, which when you're on the sun, like some people say main character syndrome. To me, I think about it as Leos have main character ownership. Like when people say the universe doesn't revolve around you, like actually it does. Like each of us are our own sun with our own solar system revolving around us. And Leo is willing to own that. And to me, that's part of where the shout outs and the generosity of spirit come from with Leo, because Leo's like, I get it. I'm the main character in my own movie. This is the movie I'm seeing. I realize that nobody else is seeing this movie, and therefore I have a really unique perspective to offer and really special one-of-a-kind gifts to offer because I'm the only one in this movie. But then also, what movie are you starring in? I want to know about that. Like, let me see the truth of who you are and what's special and unique about you. And that's where I think like the specific nodal cohort of South Node in Leo which is the one right after me. Right? I didn't know if it was okay to out you or not, Diana, but you're
It's my one Leo placement.
You're literally
Mine's Chiron, so I get it.
I have Juno there. If that's it though. But I'm Virgo Pisces node, so I know a lot of people in your nodal cohort, and I'm thinking of you when I say this, Diana. Like the way that you are so organically able to see what is special and unique about people and speak to that. Like I noticed that in Leo in general, but specifically the South Node and Leo cohort. I always see that. I also, the other piece of the perception piece that's really relevant to me with Leo, and this I think is true for Leo suns, but especially Leo risings. The stereotype of like outgoing, performative, being the main character doesn't always resonate with especially Leo risings, I think. Leo is very aware that it's being perceived, right? Like not only does the sun shine light on things, but the sun is the light. Like the sun
source.
you can't not see it when it's out. So it's like, you know, Leo, I think in general, and it sounds like it resonates with you, but like the rising specifically, because you can't unfilter your rising sign. It's always with you. It's like, I'm aware there are eyes on me. And so I think that performativeness can come out in a way that's like, all right, well, let me curate how I show up since I'm being perceived, but it can also show up a lot as like an extreme self-consciousness that like someone's looking, I better be very, very, very careful.
Absolutely. I mean, like anyone that bothers to pay attention, like to like my Instagram, like my feed, for instance, will notice that I archive my personal posts like I'm on a schedule. Like I posted a personal post, you see my face, it's up there for like a week. It's up there for a couple of weeks and it's gone. Because there's something about that constancy of perception of being seen that makes me incredibly uncomfortable. Like this has to have a limit. Like this has to expire at some point, or at least refresh. Because also I kind of feel like, I mean, there are obviously like several factors that play into this, or maybe not so obviously, but I mean, it's worth mentioning that I'm also like incredibly like heavily mutable. And at any given time, I reserve the right to change my mind, especially with regards to how I want to show up in the world, how I want to be perceived, how I want to be seen. And so, yeah, that goes hand in hand with my image. I love to, I love to share the light. I love to be hand in hand in the light, but me by myself, very uncomfortable, very, very.
That just makes me think about how I think,
but it's
like,
fun for a moment. Just want to say, it's fun for a moment.
The 15 minutes, not the 15 centuries. But it makes me think about how excellent Leo can be at being the centrifugal force amidst others, right? Like the unifying force. Like we don't have a solar system without Sol, without the sun. Like that's what allows all of these planets to be in interaction with each other. And like whenever like Leo is in a position to coordinate or to remind people like this is our shared purpose, and like, you know, I don't know, for some reason, like Jenneba, I'm just thinking about Mercury's Brood hardcore right now, where it's like you're the organizing principle of this project that is allowing an entire constellation of people to express themselves through a particular publication with a particular ethos, and in a way that is about being generous with who gets seen and heard within this little slice of the astrological industry that we occupy, right? And, you know, Leo, the sun, like by itself, there's no one to receive the generosity. It's in collaboration that generosity becomes possible. And so there's this inherent relationality that Leo has that I think gets dismissed whenever folks like narrow it down to self-centered performativity. Like that's that may be an expression of Leo when other forms of Leonine expression haven't been cultivated or aren't part of someone's awareness as a possibility. But that's not the expression of Leo.
Yeah, something that comes up a lot when I think about Leo is the regalness, you know, the big king energy, big queen energy, you know, and just like the centeredness that a lot of Leos tend to have. There's just this, like, I don't know, regal quality to Leo energy, where it's like, you know, yes, like you said, some do crave attention and seek it out in a way, you know, externally, but most of the time it's like you don't need to do anything, you know. It's like there's like you said, the oh God, Mercury and Sag.
Centrifugal.
Jesus Christ. Centrifugal force. I just knew as soon as I was about to say it, like, this is not going to go well. Yeah, just it's magnetic, like just like, again, moth to a lamp, like you're going to be drawn towards that centeredness. There's just this regalness to Leo energy that I heavily admire. Like I said, my only Leo placement is Chiron, and so not very cute. But Leo energy is the confidence piece, I think, is something that I'm like, both Aries and Leos, with the, you know, the domiciled and exalted sun. I'm always just so like enamored by, like, damn, you really just did that. You didn't like go into like a shame spiral because of it.
Oh, we might have.
Oh, I do.
You maybe just didn't see it.
You didn't see it, but we did. We did.
I also
behind
think
closed doors
with Leo, okay, so a little bit of context. I'm doing this project this year where I take psychedelics every month and tune in to the solar energy. And so I had this experience during the Cancer one that really clarified the experience, or it really was a necessary predecessor to how Leo came through. I had this, like, I cried for like an hour on the Cancer trip, no surprise, and was having this like really intense existential dread. My partner's a Cancer, so he was kind of like doulaing me through it. But I kept having this feeling of like, because I think so elementally, right? And in Cancer, you finish the elements. So there was this feeling of like completion that I felt like I arrived to in Cancer energy. And this dread, this sorrow, this dread was showing up of like, what's the point of going on? Like, why even go again? We've been through the cycles. I started to think a lot about Cancer being associated with the idea of like, we live in a matrix, and mother, the word mother comes from the same Latin base word that matrix comes from. So that's been a big theme for me. And then I was like, why do we go on? Why do we need to go through the elements again? That was the question I kept asking myself as I was crying in Cancer energy, and where I think I got towards the end of that experience, but then continued to sit with a lot in this passing Leo season, was there's a level of intentionality on the second round through the elements, a level of consciousness and awareness that is not present when we're in Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. And Leo is the introduction of that consciousness, of that intentionality, of that awareness. And this is what I think about now when I think about the I will statement for Leo, is like, okay, I've seen the arena. I've seen the matrix now. I see the world I exist in. I've experienced it through all the elements. And now I'm here to exert my will to step into the role of the main character in this experience of life. And that's become a really big part of how I understand the Leo parts of us.
That's beautiful. Wow.
You're Kelsey, you're making me think about my relationship to creation, creating rather, and how, yeah, like at any given point I reserve the right to change my mind, and also anything I create, even if I may evolve outside of it and beyond it, needs to feel like it will stand the test of time. Otherwise, what's the fucking point? I don't want anything to do with it. And once I reach that point, if I ever do, then that work is dead to me. So when people are like, oh, like I can't find this work of yours that you completed like a couple of years ago. Like I loved it or whatever. I'm just like, maybe it's archived somewhere, but like you'll never get to see it because I have evolved outside of it. And that particular thing to me did not stand the test of time. So I think it comes back to like when I first opened this up to immovable genius. If it doesn't speak to immovable genius, I don't want it.
It's like the fixicity of the inspirational piece of fire. That's what that feels like to me. Like I will inspire and transform, but only if it stands the test of time.
Permanent transformation.
I have to write that.
Final thoughts on Leo? King shit.
I would love to, Diana, if you have any thoughts on Saturn's relationship with Leo, I would love to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think one of the things I think about with Saturn in Leo is like I think one of the things that Saturn prefers to do is architect and engineer, but Saturn is not the king on the throne inside the castle that has been architected. Right. And I feel like part of this, like one of the things that comes up for me when I think about Saturn and Leo is the purported golden age, like the age of Kronos, when everything was great and wonderful. We can also think of this like this, if you're into fixed stars, this is the same time period that the deity attached to Spica, Astrea, was still on Earth walking among humans. And there's like a pain, there's a nostalgia, like a painful nostalgia, like a very injurious nostalgia with Saturn and Leo of, you know, when people listened to me, right? When the structures of sovereignty and the structures of society were harmonious with one another. And in the same way that I think, you know, Saturn and Aries has an impatience, or like the pain of impatience, I think Saturn and Leo feels that pain of unfulfilled sovereignty and unfulfillable levels of sovereignty, right? Like there's only so much that any given individual can do in the face of the sociocultural and socioeconomic situation that we find ourselves in. And I think, you know, right now in this time period, as we were talking about before we even jumped on the call, like that is a real bruisey, tender spot culturally right now for a lot of people. But I think Saturn and Leo can access that pain in a very specific way. And if there isn't an outlet for it, it's tyrannical.
Yes, it is.
It's tyrannical. It can be like just off the charts authoritarian because of this. Like it's a pain reaction to it could be like this. And I can imagine in my head how it was, like the obsession with the golden age, I think of as a very Saturn and Leo kind of thing.
Oh wow. And like balanced. Even like the etymology, well, is that etymology? But just like gold, Leo, age, Saturn. That just fits really nicely. yeah, totally. I mean, and I think you know, I think of it as like, for some reason right now I'm just thinking about the Pluto and Leo generation as like a very specific like edge expression of Leo that I think can filter through Saturn and Leo as well. Just it could have been, it would have been, it was, and now it has to be like this so we can get back to that. And it's not being as actually present in the present as Saturn can excel at being.
whenever it's not burdened by nostalgia and possibility.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because something I did want to mention about Leo is just that besides the sun, we don't, no other planet has dignity there. And Saturn's the only planet that has debility there. So it is this very interesting part of the zodiac, right? Where it's like only the sun, only the king gets to really occupy the throne there. And how, you know, the Saturn in detriment, it's interesting kind of thinking about how like the sun doesn't exalt anyone, or really, you know, it also doesn't, it's not a place of debility for anyone besides Saturn. Like maybe you can think of it as the foe of the sun. But it kind of also speaks to that generosity, I think, of the sun, you know, just like, yeah, you can all kind of hang out in the kingdom, right? I'm not going to really, it's a fun place to hang. But no one else has taken the throne here.
Yeah. It's like for some reason, I'm just thinking about in the Lord of the Rings, like the stewards of Gondor technically could never sit on the throne of Gondor until the king returned. And then the king was occupying the throne of Gondor because anyway.
And the only one not welcomed here is anyone who's going to try to exert an authority that's not my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the avarice and cruelty of wow, my brain just totally blanked. I'm such a Lord of the Rings nerd, but I can't remember the disgusting man with the tomato in the movies.
I wish I could help you.
Not
Boromir and Faramir's dad. Oh my god.
Where's Joe Gleason when you need her?
I like actually though, Joe, where are you?
She'd fit right in too.
Holy crapperoonies. Okay, whatever. Lord of the Rings fans, you're gonna know who I'm
everyone's
talking
screaming at their
everybody is yelling at me right now.
Laptops,
I'm gonna remember as soon as we get off the call. But whenever like the steward is occupying the place of rulership in Gondor, like he's actually just a fucking ass. He's just dumb and authoritarian and terrible to his sons, and ineffective as a leader. Did you find it, Kelsey? Did you look it up for me?
I Ariesed it for you.
Thank you.
Denethor.
Yeah, Denethor, the steward of Gondor. Thank you, Lord Denethor. Terrible person. And then just is like filled with despair, even though there was still hope. Like he would have let the entire kingdom of Gondor fall, even though it wasn't actually at that point yet because of his despair. And he's like always wearing like all black. Like, okay, Denethor, excellent example of a not great Saturn in Leo. Just gonna roll with that.
Do you think that maybe Shrek season one, movie one of Shrek, before he like got nice, when he was like, you know, the leader of the swamp. Never mind.
I mean, it's been so long since I've seen Shrek. But I feel like that's maybe more. I think
like
that's more
like begrudgingly the leader of the swamp, and
I feel like that's more Sun and
people.
Aquarius.
Okay.
Than Saturn and Leo. Yeah.
Let's talk about Sag.
Yeah.
Let's get into Sagittarius. So our mutable fire, our wildfire. Take it away.
Yeah, I'm the Sag one. Okay.
You're the super Sag.
Yeah, Sun, Moon, and Mercury all in Sagittarius. And this is it's weird talking about it in public because it is in my 12th house. And so I feel like my Sagittarianness comes out the most when I feel really comfortable with people. But I mean, Sagittarius is the explorer, right? Like Sagittarius is like, I want to experience lifeness, but I don't want to just do it one way. Like I don't want to find a single way to do it and just like maintain that the way that Leo does. And I'm not trying to like like narrow vision focus, the way that Aries can be so focused. It's like, I want to know how they do it over there and how they do it over there and how they imagine all of the different ways of beingness. Like, you know, Sagittarius has this investigatory capacity to it. Like, it's very curious about the different ways that beingness can happen, the different ways that vitality can express. And like, I don't know, like I think about how Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. It's Jupiter's more buoyant of the two Jupiterian signs. You know, Pisces is like the ocean itself. Sagittarius is the windsurfer on the ocean. Right. You know, Sagittarius is one of two signs that is like chimeric, right? We have Capricorn as the sea goat, and we have Sagittarius as the centaur. And so we can also take in the way that the animal, like the real animal quality of human beingness, which we see in the horse portion of the centaur, gets combined with the meaning making and philosophical part of the centaur that is like the human torso and head of the centaur. And it's that combination of experiencing aliveness and then creating meaning out of that experience that I think really characterizes Sagittarianness. And the collecting of different ways of doing that is the mutable quality of Sagittarianness. Like, there's not a single way to be a being. And Sagittarius is like, ooh, what about this way? What about that way? What about this other way? Like, that was fun. That was cool. That was great. I'm never fucking doing that again. Like, you know, that there's that, I don't know. I feel like I've already said explorative and I can't really think, like, my brain thesaurus is not kicking in, but yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, so much that I think when I think of Sag, I think of one phrase that comes to mind is always like student of life. So I think it very much is about just like gaining experience and knowledge just because it's like, I just want to know. Similarly to Gemini, but I think Gemini is on a much more you know, micro level, I guess, of it with it being ruled by Mercury. It's kind of more in the facts and figures of it all. Whereas Sag obviously has the capacity for that, especially those of us with Mercury and Sag, we kind of get into it. But I think in general, it's just like, I want to know, I just want to experience. I just want to have the experience to kind of add it to my philosophical framework. And like,
it's like a unified theory of being, but understanding that everybody can have their own unified theory of being. And so it's a process of building up my own unified theory of being and knowing that I can, like, you know, for me in my work, like I think about like the solar quality of my Sagittariusness, right? It's like, I would like to emit that in a way that other people who want to see it and want to learn from it can see and learn from it. But I'm not trying to impose that on anyone as the only way to have a unified theory of being.
Yes. I mean, then we do have our dogmatic Sages who do, right?
Yes.
Who do think that everyone should have the, you know, the same unified theories of being. But yeah, I think in general, the Sagittarius expression is very like diverse, you know, and it is very much like, I think there's something about Sag for me that is very true, is that Sag really wants to know what is universal, you know, like, I think that's part of like the search for so much different experiences, because it's like, we know everything's different, but also there is some underlying universality, right? And I think that's what Jupiter is so concerned with too, sitting up there on Mount Olympus, like observing everything from this.
But also it's the stability. If we think about Jupiter as the stabilizer, like, what is the biggest like possible base for something? That's the universal base. like the universal ground of being, is the sturdiest thing. And so it's like searching for a sturdiness that also allows for perpetual adaptability.
Yeah.
Perpetual permutations.
Which is so Jupiter. It's so, being of many various forms, but also that encompasses everything.
Yeah.
I think that's what, draws me to astrology. My Mercury in Sag, I think, just like loves that about astrology. It is such a universal, it's a universal language, right? It's something where someone in, Taiwan could pick up a birth chart and still, maybe we're not reading it the same way, right? But those symbols are universal. The planets are universal. And yeah, I think that Sag does search for that, like what's that underlying sort of thing that connects us all, that we can find consensus under, which is a very Jupiter word that I like to use. And that's where we get the associations of Sag with religion, that's what religion is. It's like bringing people together under a consensus of belief or faith.
Yeah, belief and behavior for religion. And then for spirituality, maybe just belief or philosophy can also be.
Right, philosophy too.
Yeah.
I think there's like a little bit of a natural contradiction in Sagittarius energy, because it is this Jupiterian trying to see the greater context. Again, like edge of solar
come closer
like edge of solar. I'm like leaning back into Jupiter right now. Edge of solar system vibes, trying to see it all to get the whole big picture, but it's fire, the most subjective of the elements. And I always say Sag rising is a balm. Like the way that I experience being ruled by Jupiter, maybe this is like a little extra, I forget the word you used, Diana, but like light, I think, or it was you, Kirah? Buoyant, yeah, than a Pisces rising. But being ruled by Jupiter means like, if I can find meaning, I'm okay. That's Sag energy to me. Like, can I make sense of it? Yes. Again, like Sag following the death moment that is Scorpio and looking back at things. How did this transform me though? What's the lesson here? What's the meaning of this? Then there's like, if you can find some meaning, you can find ease, is something that I'll often say. But then it's like the dogma and the shadow of that shows up when we let our subjectivity try to become. It's not unlike what you all were talking about with Saturn and Leo. Right? Like when we try to over universalize our subjective meaning and our subjective truth.
And I think that's like a very Jupiterian tendency to be like, to turn into philosophies that which was merely experience.
And I think about this like journey through the fire signs, right? Like life begins at Aries, then we kind of like grab life and do it the way we want in Leo, because now we have conscious awareness. And then Sagittarius is like, well, what was that about? Like, why did I do all of that? And one of the things that came through to me this recent Sag season was just Sag, I think, kind of inherently knows that no one can teach me better than myself. And should know that no one can teach anyone else better than themselves, because nobody's lived the movie you've lived. Nobody's seen things from your perspective. So I think there's a lot in Sag energy that's also about trusting your point of view and the way that you will make meaning out of the experiences that you've had, and understanding that while, yes, we all have Venus and we all like to connect and relate, nobody has seen what you've seen in the way you've seen it. And therefore nobody can prescribe meaning for you the way that you're able to do it for yourself.
Djenneba, do you have Sag comments?
I do. Yeah. I was thinking about just the nature of Sag being a double-bodied sign, which is to say one of the mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Pisces, Sag. And there's this idea that it was Dorotheus, right? There's this idea that whatever you have in a double-bodied sign double it because there's just so much more. It gets amplified. And honestly, like it's actually really, I don't think this word has been used yet today, but it's very rare to hear people, astrologers talk about, no, I'll say people talk about Jupiter without hearing the word expansion. It's like one of those words that we fall on like really easily just because it's just so obvious, right? And I think that comes out really loudly when we consider the double-bodiedness of Sagittarius, in particular, of course, Pisces as well. But just this idea that this mutable fire can't be contained because it's like constantly shifting, constantly changing, even changing in nature, changing in image, unpredictable. And yeah, just the power of Jupiter to just like constantly surprise you.
Yeah. So like as you were speaking, an image came to mind where it's like Aries is the match that lights the fire, Leo is the embers, and then Sagittarius is the dancing of the flame. Right.
Yeah.
Where that like movement itself as a form of stability.
Yeah, it's what keeps it going. For sure.
Yeah.
Without the movement, everything stops.
Right. It's like an anti-stagnancy. Yeah. And another thing that I think comes up with Sagittarius in particular is like a specific kind of experiential luck, right? And I see this more with Sag moons than Sag suns, but just like a specific kind of a resilience that is born of a particular philosophical perspective, that whatever has been experienced is not the only thing that can be or will be experienced.
Yeah. I feel like, oh, sorry. Were you gonna say
Just as a
something?
Sag moon, yeah, like thinking about how the moon is, what do we need to feel emotionally secure? What I need is to know that I can make sense of this, that there's meaning, that there's a lesson in it, and nothing isn't that. There's nothing that doesn't offer me that, right? That's how I'm resonating with that idea. Like, again, the Sagittarius is such a balm to me. I always feel like such an Aries Sag when I say that, but it's just like, it's medicine. Like it's very medicinal energy.
Very temperance vibes.
Yeah.
Kirah, you spoke to your Mercury, and I know you and Diana share a Mercury placement. Just thinking about how we see in the astrology community that there is a overrepresentation of Mercury and Sag. And I was just wondering if either one of you would like to speak to, I mean, like, besides the fact that like, yeah, like people were born around that time, but speak to like why that is in any capacity. That makes sense to you?
I mean, for me, I think it kind of goes back to like this, this love for a shared language, and one that is so diverse too, you know, it's so, there's so many different ways you can use it. And I think also just the fact that, again, going back to like the student of life archetype with Sag, like, you can make astrology, you can make it so much your own. And also it's this thing that you can never learn completely. You know, you can endless. It's just endless knowledge, endless ways you can approach it. And I think that part of it too just is like really attractive to Sag placements, you know, especially Mercury and Sag that needs that. I think Mercury and Sag, it's a difficult placement because I always picture like a tiny little Mercury like roaming the galaxy, like, what am I supposed to do with all, like, how am I supposed to make sense of all of this? And astrology really provides a framework for making sense of things. And yeah, conceptualizing all the big things into something that's like more tangible, I think, and yeah, digestible.
Yeah,
There's so many of you.
there's I think part of it too is like if you grow up with Mercury in Sagittarius, you're growing up with an insatiable intellectual curiosity, right? And it's it's an intellectual curiosity that's not about abstraction, but is about lifeness in some way. And so if you can find a system of thought or of meaning making that happens to be an infinite fountain that slakes the thirst of that insatiable curiosity, it's like a godsend. It's like, thank fucking God. And like, there's also so much nuance. Like Mercury in Sagittarius is like, I want the nuance, I want the details, but I don't want the details that make me rigid. I want the details that make me agile, that allow me to frolic through the forest. And I think, astrology is absolutely one of the ways, one of those like infinite fountains that, Mercury and Sagittarius is just like, I'm just imagining like Garfield like scarfing down lasagna, only it's like a Mercury, it's like a centaur with like winged hooves, like eating a galaxy, like an infinite galaxy coming into its mouth. So yeah.
I'm thinking about a word that comes to mind for me often with Sagittarius is oracle. Like everything is an oracle when you're in Sagittarian energy. And I don't have this placement, but I can imagine that Mercury and Sag is like, Mercury is how you process. You need the oracle to process with Mercury and Sagittarius. Like, what does it mean is the thing that your brain is constantly doing. And astrology can answer that in any moment. You can look to astrology for what does it mean. It turns the whole world into an oracle.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, when you look at the archetypes of the planets, the signs, like Mercury and Sagittarius specifically came up one of these books as a messenger of kings, Mercury being the messenger, just like the nature of fire being that of kings, but also just like back to oracle, fire being the divine, right? The divine spirit, and to be able to articulate that fire into language, or like any form of language. Like language is not just like what we verbalize, right? It's what we write, what we draw, what we sing, what we put into chords. It's all of it.
I just remembered I was having a Mercury return transit when I saw my birth chart for the first time. So yeah, it was a bunch of Sag. I just pulled up the chart. Yeah, it was like Mercury, Venus, and Sun all in Sag.
Like, that's what it means.
Yeah, literally. It was the most profound, one of the most profound experiences I've ever had, where it's just like, the reason I know the day and time, the reason I remember is because I screenshotted it and put it on Facebook. Because I just remember being like, what is like, oh my God, I'm freaking out, like no one cared, of course, because no one knew what it was. But it was a Mercury return. And Mercury is, there's a lot of Mercury is like wherever the Mars was in this chart right now, which is really interesting. But I think that there's just this lust for like knowledge, and astrology really helps quench that. Jesus Christ. Mercury and Sag.
It's like Mercury and Sag is perpetually thirsty. Like horny for philosophy and meaning.
Yeah, literally that's why I do this show. I'm like, I just need to talk to astrologers more than I already do on a regular basis. I need some intellectual combo. And one other thing that I was going to piggyback off of earlier when it comes to Sag, I feel like just the faith piece, just the ability to see glass half full. is something I mean, I feel like it's rare to find a pessimistic Sagittarius, it's rare to find one that like feels hopeless and like, all faith is lost. Not to say it doesn't happen all the time, but like as like a personality trait, that's
As like a
pretty rare.
baseline. As a baseline.
Yeah.
I have my moments. I call it the dooms.
I mean, you're a Saturnian.
You are ruled by Saturn, right?
I have a Capricorn rising with a lot of stuff in Capricorn. But like the dooms are they're always countered by the like something. It's either something internal or something external, like comes along and reminds me that the dooms are just as permanent as anything else, which is to say not permanent at all.
The hope is never gone. Like that's something I didn't realize about myself until I could see it in my chart and see the difference in other charts, that if there's meaning, which there always is, I am okay. And it's like the flame that can't die, and I'm in this moment, I'm thinking about it as Sag coming after Scorpio. Like even after death, there is light.
There's something sparkly. There's a light at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah, that's often how I think about Sag too. It's just like being able to rise up after something really difficult or really, low place, and being able to find meaning, be able to see the light, be able to get perspective really on what had happened. What had happened?
What had happened?
Yeah, I know. I mean, like I can't believe this slipped out.
but I mean, yeah, and like, my mic. Just like I just feel like Sag can get much more altitude on those matters than like the other fire signs, because we know we've established that Aries is a sprinter, and we know that like Leo like is like just operates at the sort of constant hum of fire, and then Sagittarius is that dance of movement, and when I'm thinking about the triplicities, and I'm thinking about the spheres, and fire being the least dense and getting the closest we can to the cosmos, I feel like that's Jupiter, that's Sag, being able to expand and go as high as possible. Even air is not going that high. So that's all Sag, baby.
Even just thinking about like the stars themselves, like the actual stars are fire.
Twinkling away.
Yeah.
In the galactic center being in, the sign of Sagittarius, I often think of just like space when I think of Sagittarius, and just the endless possibilities, the endless, roaming and traveling and journeying that can
space operas
that can take place. Yeah.
Whew. I mean, that's just making me think about like I haven't watched that much Star Trek, but I know like one of the ideals of Star Trek is this like there's a certain equity and desire to connect with others that haven't been connected with yet. There's like the exploratory quality within Star Trek. Interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. Thank you for that, Kirah.
Yeah, the exploring part it's just like the journeying again, just like being able to like have experience. I think taking the journey, Sag is very much concerned with the journey, not so much the destination.
Coming back to fire is like the self-experiential realm. Mutable fire is like, how can I be changed?
Yeah, and also, who am I in different circumstances?
That definitely hits. Yeah. Any other last words about Sagittarius? I mean, I guess I just want to say like I love y'all. I love a Sag. I love any Sag placements. Give me the Sag. I was raised by a Sagittarius, my mom, and I just find Sag energy to be so honestly just so fun. I think the Jupiterian parts of Sag, like the ability to just like be loud, be kind of obnoxious, like say words that don't actually like aren't actual words, and just like the like spontaneous That's why I love being like when we're together, like any Sag Mercury, I'm just like, we can just kind of say shit that's not
It's
actual.
about what it means. It's not about the
exactly. If
actual
you get what I
language.
mean, that's all that matters.
There's just like all of a sudden there's like a series of syllables that don't sound anything like words, but we're both on the exact
yeah, we get
same
it.
train.
I know exactly what you're
It's
talking. I know
good.
exactly what you mean.
It's
So yeah, Sag, I have definitely a special place. I mean, the ruler of my 7th house is my Mercury in Sag, and so I just love it. I love that energy so much. Can't get enough.
As an Aries Sag, here's my defensive position around Sagittarius. The same way that someone, I think it was Diana, spoke to earlier about thinking Leo is self-centered is not always, but sometimes, maybe often, a projection of someone not being comfortable being centered in their own self. Something I have experienced a lot is that I will speak with the level of conviction about what is true to me, fully honoring that this is my subjective truth. And oftentimes I have learned to put that very clear disclaimer in the front of the things that I say. And still often I feel that I'm being received as dogmatic. So that's just something I will point out about Sagittarius, that I think sometimes people experience the strength with which Sagittarius speaks of their truth, the conviction which they show up and say, this is the story I've been experiencing and this is the meaning that I have come to, can feel kind of like threatening or dysregulating for others.
Oh, you think you know everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know everything. I do know my life though.
I have seen what I have seen.
Yeah.
That is so real. That is so real. Yeah, on that note, like any other sort of last like messages you want to share to the world about fire signs, whether it's your sign or fire signs in general. Yeah, that's
I mean, like, this is really cheesy, but it's like, if you play with fire, you will get burned. You will. It's just a guarantee. And that's not a reason to not play with fire.
Yes, I love that.
It's really nice for me to hear. But also, if you don't want to get burned, like, maybe don't come out to play today.
Yeah, you can choose whether or not you have the resourcing and the balms, like the salves or whatever. But it's like, you know, that's like, fire is the most volatile and dangerous of the elements, and it's also the most illuminative, literally illuminative. And it's like that whole can't unsee thing. We can think of that as a fire concept. It's like, you've seen something, you've recognized something, you've come into awareness about something that alters your world.
You will be changed.
You're changed. You're transformed in the same way that fire permanently transforms. And also, why else be alive?
That part.
I think the thing that's been, I'm sure everyone listening can hear that I'm currently moving through a lot of my own like stuff around being so embodied fire. Like, my nodal square was recently South Node moving through Sag, hit my moon, hit my first house, squared my natal nodes. So I'm like very, Chiron's on my sun and has been all year. Like, I'm in a sun year. I'm very in my like, what does it mean to be fire and what are the ouchies of that? And how can I exist as fire anyways? So you can hear that tone in this share, but the concept of humility has been very present for me lately. And something I've almost written about, but I haven't been able to quite find all the right words for it yet, is this sense of like, yes, each element may struggle to access and embody a certain quality. And in the case of fire, I might say humility is that quality, but also other elements can really struggle to recognize and appreciate and accept, in the case of fire, humility in the way that fire is actually able to authentically express it. And so that's something that I would invite for people in interfacing with fire, is to understand that the way fire shows up in humility is different than the way that any other element is going to show up in humility, and that just because it doesn't feel cowering, right, or like changeable or flexible to you, doesn't mean that that fire hasn't been through the whole process of observation and consideration. Fire is not able to not transform. It's not able to not burn, as Diana said. So just try to accept humility in the way that fire is able to show it to you. Don't assume that the fire people in your life aren't humble, because they are still showing up the way that they are.
Yeah, that's super fair. The only thing I have to add is that fire, I think, is the only thing that gets me up in the morning. I, 12th house moon stuff. I have a deep well of emotionality. I do not enjoy accessing though, personally. I enjoy my comfort. I feel comfort feels very like earthy to me, just like my bed. I have a very cozy bed. Like I like my house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not what gets me up in the morning. Connecting with people, it's up there, but fire, just like the drive to create things from scratch, the drive to listen to what's inside of me, what's inside of my body, what's just coursing through, just like the currents and what I can feel, like that's all fire. And without that, I mean, kind of speaking to what Diana said just a little bit ago, what's the point? I don't know what the point is without that, without those sparks. And if I can't find the spark, then that's a bad day.
That is a bad day or bad week or bad month.
It's bad.
It's not great.
Yeah. I hear that. I would say, obviously I'm on a fire sign, but I do have, my moon Mercury. And I would say something that comes up for me is like, do not try to temper someone's fire. Like, don't try to contain someone's fire. If their fire is too much for you, then,
you're not the right container for it.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you need to step back a little bit, because
it's like, you don't have to put your face in the campfire.
Yeah. And I think that, I dated someone that had no fire placements at all in their chart. And I didn't realize how bad that was for me, until we were really into it. And I was like, wow, it just felt like they were, maybe not intentionally, but like it very much felt like a dampening of my inner fire of like any sort of, the fun parts of me, right? Like the fiery fun parts of me. And so, I think that's something that needs to be said, is like, if you can't, I think a lot of people do see the fire, that spark in people and want it for themselves, or think that they can, by getting close to it, by having close proximity, it can kind of rub off on them maybe. But like, I think fire is meant to be shared for sure, but like, it's also, you need to cultivate it in your own ways. And trying to control someone else's doesn't work.
Yeah, it's better to take inspiration from the fire person than to try to take fire from the fire person.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's tell the people where they can find you. Thank you guys so much for this. This is a really beautiful conversation.
I feel kind of revitalized.
Good. I'm gonna go smoke after this. I'm gonna get close to some fire. No, but let's tell the people where they can find you. Kelsey
Rose Tort, KelseyRosetort is my Instagram and my website.
Awesome. And people can book with you, both human design and astrology, right? And then you do something that I admire so much, and I might have to adopt at some point when I'm not burnt out by teaching, which is like, I'm just going to teach something that I want to teach every month. And I love that. I love that about you,
Mhm.
and just like your whole Instagram presence, your whole social presence is really inspiring. So definitely check Kelsey out and learn some good stuff.
So,
Djenneba, how about you?
You can find me in many places. I'm gonna plug my newsletter. I want to build my newsletter. And you can find that at my website, djennebadrammeh.com. Should I spell it? It's really long.
That's all right. I mean, if you
Yeah, it'll
want,
be in the
but we have
notes.
links. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be in the notes. djennebadrammeh.com. Is where you can sign up for my more or less monthly newsletter. I do horoscopes for the signs, sometimes affirmations, and just like sharing my writing as I feel called to. I am also on Instagram. My is my first name @Djenneba. And I am on Twitter @Kyron's Bitch. Oh, also, by the time this is out, my project with our colleague EY Washington will be out. We're gonna be on Patreon. Our project is called Under the Beams, so you'll be able to find us at
Yay.
Patreon. Yeah, patreon.com/Under the Beams, and that's gonna be a really awesome podcast, digging into various angles of astrology through our joyful but raggedy lens, intersectional Black feminist lens. So yeah, check us out.
So exciting. Oh, I'm really happy to hear that, Under the Beams. And
Finally.
And yeah, you'll be back on to talk more about Mercury's brood.
Yes.
So we can plug that in the next episode if you want. But yeah, definitely check out Djenneba's writing. Like I said, one of the best astro writers we have. So I'm happy that you're building your newsletter list, because more people need to hear it. More people need to read it.
Thank you.
Diana.
Hi. Yeah. So my handle is Damashena at all of the places. It'll be clickable link in the show notes because I don't feel like spelling it right now. But that's Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon, as well as damashena.com to find my website. I would like to build my newsletter list as well, except I don't actually never send newsletters. Trying to get better about that. But by the time this is live, when is this live?
March 8th? March 3rd.
Yeah, early
March 3rd.
March,
okay. Yeah. By the time this is out, I will have at least one other workshop besides the ones that are currently available on my website up, and it'll be the Rejection is Liberation. So if you liked me talking about Saturn, you can hear me talk about no as a liberatory practice via that workshop recording. So
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys again. This was so great.
thanks for having us,
Yeah.
Kirah.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you for
Kirah.
having us.